Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this Academic Affairs Committee meeting of the Board of School Directors in Springfield Township. I'm Damian Johnston. I'm the Assistant Superintendent in the school district and your host for today's meeting. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. We have a busy agenda. I'm happy to welcome our four representatives from the school board, our three student representatives, and then members of our administration and teaching faculty for a busy agenda and conversation today. Today, I have for you presentations on program, particularly to the high school and some things that we're talking about there, and the updated program of studies book. So Dr. Scragen and Dr. Rittenhouse will share that information with all of us. The middle school team is here. They're going to talk with you about a resequencing of math. We're going to talk about the proposed calendars, and we'll talk about why we're not actually ready to present those, but we'll give you some information about where we are. And then we have a presentation from Dr. Dennis and Mrs. Schrage on the proposed special education plan. That is, we are in that cyclical time to publish that at our next board meeting. So we have a busy afternoon ahead, and then we'll talk about take any public comments, and of course, talk about our meetings that are coming up for the rest of the spring. As you know, it's always a busy spring season for academic affairs. Without any further ado, I am happy to bring forward Dr. Rittenhouse and Dr. Scragen representing our high school this afternoon. I'm going to ask them to talk with all of you and share with you our recommended changes to the high school program of studies for the 25-26 school year. Dr. Rittenhouse, Dr. Scragen, did you all decide who was driving this bus?
Dr. Scragen is driving the bus, and I am a passenger for now.
Awesome. Thanks, Dr.
Sitting in the front seat, though. I'm in the front seat. I'm always a good boy.
Yeah, just Don't be changing the radio station on me, okay?
Yeah, so,
Dr. Scragen, let me know when you need me to advance your slides.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I just want to point out a couple changes that we have with the program of studies. One is it's an expanded version of what it was last year. One of the things we're including is a discussion for all students and families to understand the difference between first and second honors, because that was not in the program of studies. So that's in there now. We've also done, I think, a much better job of explaining the process of scheduling to families and students about how we create a new schedule every year, how we want students to get all the courses that they're looking for, but that might not actually happen, as well as if they get a course that they're not sure they want to be in, how to go through changes with their schedule in the future. So we also point out to the students that we really would like them to try to take a challenging course. And a challenging course is not necessarily, for me, it needs to be every student takes an AP course. A challenging course is for a student who might be very shy, that maybe taking a theater course, breaking out of that shell, or for somebody who doesn't feel really strong with mathematics, taking an additional math just because it's more of a challenge. So we're looking to have our students kind of stretch their minds, a little bit more. And that's all in the new program of studies. So if you could please, Dr. Johnson, next slide, please.
Any questions so far from anybody? Okay.
Somehow I got muted. I apologize. One thing we've expanded is our dual enrollment offerings. We are going to be teaming with the College of New Jersey, who will be giving students who take one of our AP courses, except AP pre-calculus, that for a set fee, students would be able to get a full college credit for that AP course. It's taught within our school. It's not taught by them. Students would just sign up for it with dual enrollment like they do with Montgo. We also have another course through the University of Pittsburgh. So we're expanding. I would say didn't do the math off in the top of my head, and it was like 4 times to 5 times the current offerings of our dual enrollment for students who might be interested in doing that. We are also continuing our program with Montgomery County Community College with 2 of our courses that we're trying to look through expanding. So I continuing to have those conversations with them. And that's all in the program of studies with symbols that people can read and say, oh, this is a potential dual enrollment course. I should think about this. So it's all coded by symbols with regards to those courses. And then many people are not aware about the Bridge Academy at Drexel. It's not a dual enrollment program, but it is an optional program for students in 10th, 11th, 12th grade who are recommended, who can earn college credit for free. There's no fee for one course, but students have to have the availability in their schedule to travel to Drexel. It's not where people from Drexel come out to Springfield. So that's going to be interesting, but it's something that they've offered to local residents in terms of Philadelphia and some surrounding school districts, but they're expanding that. So we've put that in our program of studies as well, and we're excited to see what happens with regards to students being able to take that course. Any questions?
No, other than this sounds like a really wonderful opportunity, and I had no idea. So this is really great information. Thank you.
You're welcome. We are very excited about it. That's every year I've tried to kind of increase the opportunities for students to, instead of just leaving school early with senior or junior privilege, to look at other courses they could take. We have VHS, which we'll continue to have, but there's only like 24 seats that we have available. So we're looking at other options and at different costs for our students.
And are you generating data on how many students take these opportunities?
We have that data, yep.
Right
now, we currently have 6 students who have signed up in their multivariable calculus class to get dual enrollment with Montco, or Montgomery County Community College.
Great.
Currently for this spring.
Anya?
I was wondering, right now I'm taking a dual enrollment with Monco, but it's not through the school, like a school teacher isn't teaching me. Is that same opportunity going to be available with University of Pittsburgh and College of New Jersey, or is it just going to be school teachers teaching a dual enrollment course?
So that's a great question. Dual enrollment actually falls under different categories. The first category is that you take it at a college and that we give you credit for the course that's offered through Springfield. You take it through the college, you pay the college, and you get the credit. Another way of doing dual enrollment is that the college sends out a professor to teach the course at a particular time at our school. You pay the fee and you would get the credit. The third option, which is most popular, is that the colleges and universities have trained or looked at our teachers' lack of a better word, transcript or resume, what we call a CV, curriculum vitae, and they determine that this particular person is accredited to teach their particular course. So for example, Ms. Whitaker will be teaching 3 courses that get dual enrollment credit through the University of Pittsburgh. She had to go through training on that. Monco, we have 2 teachers that they looked at their CV and said that was really good. So you're taking the first option, which is that you're taking it through Monco on your own time. Maybe is it online that you're taking, Anya? Yeah. So you're taking it online and you can still get that dual enrollment credit for a particular course. It's just not being taught by a teacher on our campus. Does that explain it? Okay, good.
Any more questions about it?
Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. So one we
Me,
I don't know.
I'm sorry.
Somebody's put my mute. I don't know who that is. So one thing we've expanded is with special education is the way we offer instructional support for students. In the past, it's been one course umbrellaed under the term instructional support. What we have found is that we have some students who need specialization in executive functioning skills or math skills or language arts or emotional support. So we're breaking that down now to 4 distinctive courses that students would be allowed to take, or students be allowed to be enrolled in with teacher recommendations. So that's going to be something new, and it's under our academic support area in the program of studies. With regards to career technology, Like we did last year with our AP Computer Science and AP Computer Science Principles, there are 2 different AP courses. We run those every other year. We're going to do the same thing with game development and game design. They're going to be running every other year. So we're letting students know ahead of time if that's something they want to take, they might want to start looking at their schedule to see how that will fit in their schedule, depending on which year. It won't be they won't be necessarily offered every single year. And that's a way that we can expand our offerings in career technology with the one teacher that we currently have. And then we are the third University of Pittsburgh dual enrollment course that we currently are offering is called Introduction to Computing for the Humanities, and it's actually going to be a math elective. So we're looking forward for students to sign up on that one. So that we'll have 3D, our 3D architectural design course, and then this Introduction to Computing for the Humanities would be 2 math elective courses that we're looking forward to. Any questions?
I have some questions about those special education offerings. In terms of levels for those, so you just have listed executive functioning 1 level, but math and language arts, are you looking at those as single subject courses? They're not covering specific curricular areas like algebra, other, like, is it more specialized or just general math?
It'll be more generalized
Mhm.
based on the students' IEP goals. So if you
Mhm.
have students that have IEP goals in math, that the instructor will be able to focus on those and teach to those goals,
Mhm.
as opposed to the way our instructional support classes work now is you might, for example, Dr. Johnson might be in my class and I'm going to help her with her reading assignment here, and Dr. Terry Tusky might be in my class. I'm going to help her with her algebra, or I might have to help her with her trig. So it's going to be more specialized, and the instructors will be assigned based on their specialties as well.
Mhm.
So that if we have students that might come in with, needing algebra help, others needing geometry help, but they would be able to get those helps based on their math goal.
Okay, so that's not a replacement class, it's a support class.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Yeah, just wanted to make sure. And then also okay, that's fine. Yep. That's good. Thanks.
And I have a follow-up question. So does this need to be, is a prerequisite having these in having an IEP that has this incorporated into it? Yeah, okay.
Yes, I saw that Dr. Dennis was on. I don't know if she wanted to jump in and answer.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Just to share again to
Thank
Dr.
you, Dr.
Tara
Dennis.
Tusky, we're not, students are still accessing their core instruction. What we're trying to do is create instructional support classes where kids can get more focused support in their goal areas. So if you have a specific learning disability in math, you're in with other students who have similar math needs, and we can really address that to support your success in your general ed class. So it's not a replacement to any of our core content. And it is currently a special ed only course and will continue to be so. So this is in addition to students' access to their core courses to really be focused in on the needs that are identified through their evaluations. Did that answer your question, Mrs. Everly?
Thanks. I appreciate that.
I think that's a really important step forward so that we can really identify what students are receiving, and over time take a look at sort of the use of those classes. It may be that in some years we have no students who require that math instructional support class, and therefore it would not run in the event that there's students who don't have goals in that area. But trying to really target and align those based on the scheduling process. Did I get that right? Dr. Sprague and Dr. Dennis? Okay.
Yes, you did.
Anything else any other questions on this slide before I move them along? Okay. There you go.
Okay. So the one elective that we have, math elective, is the was the decision making in sports for Pitt is a dual enrollment. That's the third one. I think it might have been incorrectly stated on the last slide, but that's the new elective for the math course. And what we're going to do with our AP Lang and Composition, which is a course that's typically run at 10th grade, We found that after COVID, we needed a little extra time, so we had added an extra half credit lab into it. We're going to pull that back now to have it only go 1 credit, which would be every other day, like our almost all of our AP classes. 1 AP class, environmental science, meets every day for a semester, but it's still 1 credit. So that's another change. And then what we've done with our music and performing arts for symphonic band, mixed chorus, concert choir, and trying to prep for a secondary strings course along the way, thank you, is to be more direct with our description of the course and encouraging students to take multiple years of course, as opposed to signing up and saying, well, I'm one and done. It's to actually build the music programs, whether it be symphonic band or mixed chorus, those types of courses, to kind of start building our program, which we've been doing since last year before, to really start getting more students in there. And then the last change that I think I'm aware of is our AP psychology. From the college board, we were given notification that students that take that course now require more math and science. So in the past, we've had it open for 10th, 11th, and 12th graders, but because of the prerequisite by the college board, we need to draw back a little bit and only offer it to 11th and 12th graders in the coming years. So that's also a change that will be in our program of studies. Questions?
Isaac?
So this is kind of a question about the music and performing arts. So I know that at our school, it conflicts with a lot of schedules. Like I do concert choir volunteer during the week. So that's like about an hour and a half hour during the week lunch and learn that I go in. So is it possible, I know a lot of kids were asking, so is it possible to get honors credit for that, or does it still count for academic? Because I know that if you take it in class, you can qualify for honors credit. So for volunteer, is it the same way, or does it have to be a class?
For volunteers, it would need to be a class for the honors credit. So I'm
Okay.
just looking now for our performing arts. Let's see exactly what it says. Here we go. So yes, Isaac, it would have to definitely be just for the class versus the volunteer time.
Okay. I also have a question about the math elective. So I understand that it's math, but it also says making in sports. So would that count for one of the 3 gym credits you have, or no?
No, it would not,
Okay.
because University of Pittsburgh is the one that tells us where we can place that course. It's not necessarily our determination of, oh, it could be here, here, here. They're the ones that said you can either make it a computer course or it could be a math course, but we have to abide by their rules in order for us to get the dual enrollment credit.
Our understanding, it's a heavy load around, it's around the statistics and the
Correct.
ways in which the patterns of sports performance are monitored and evaluated, Isaac. But it's a great question.
Yeah, kind of think like Moneyball, the movie Moneyball on steroids. It's a nice way of putting it.
An old movie, Dr. Scragan, I'm not sure.
Ouch. Thank you.
Try to break your heart there, but no. That is our recommended changes and updates. Everything else that's been in the program of studies is continuing to be recommended as it was. These are the only changes we are proposing for the coming year. I'm looking for comment or conversation from the elected school board members on whether they're okay for us to proceed with these changes and move forward with beginning to build out our schedule with these changes in mind.
So this is more about additions rather than replacement or removal.
Anything we would have, in the past, we've brought removals or replacements towards, we don't have any removals or replacements this year.
Okay.
But normally this is when we would bring those forward. Yes.
Okay. So this is all just additional opportunities for students. Nothing's being minimized or removed. Great.
That I can think of. Isaac?
Yeah, I just have a question about how this is going to be communicated. So is it going to be like a school-wide assembly, or is it going to be in the like an email, or how? I'm just wondering.
Question, Dr. Scragan?
So that's a great question, Isaac. We actually spoke about it yesterday in our, we had a meeting after school with our curriculum coordinators. Because our scheduling is going to change a little bit this year, once the program of studies is approved by the board, I will be able to release that digital copy to all the students. What we are going to be doing is hand scheduling all of our 8th graders, meaning that the counselor is going to meet with every 8th grade student coming up from the middle school and actually schedule them their courses and put that in the system. When that's done, they're going to do the same thing with all the 9th, 10th, and 11th graders at the high school. So we're hoping that by the time you leave in June, you would have your schedule pretty much established, and that would then give me time to work on balancing the schedule, making sure that I've got, for example, for our tech students, enough English courses running in the AM and running in the PM, both A block and B block and C block and D block, and doing the same thing with math in our Power School system to make sure I get that done. And then we will then release the schedules a little bit later for students. But we will be communicating. I know in the past, Isaac, because you're a junior now, you remember when you had the assemblies that we'd have an assembly and we would tell you, I give you the video, this is how you sign up for your courses, and I give you guys 2 weeks to sign up for your courses. We ran into some problems last year with things that were not necessarily done properly. So we are trying to, make sure that doesn't happen. And so that's what we'll do. So you'll hear more about this probably around the 3rd week in March, 2nd or 3rd week in March.
Anya?
I was just wondering about the AP Lang credit. I took it last year with the lab, and I was just wondering, is that extra time going to be allotted to another class, or is it just now we can take like another class the whole year in rotation with that?
So if you were to sign up for it, let's say you've already taken it, but let's say you signed up for it for next year, then you'd be able to have another class in rotation. So there are many students that take, like, for example, in their junior year or their senior year, we have students take AP Government, for example. They back that up with another AP course or other electives on the other side of that day 2 schedule. So day 1 might be the AP class, and then the day 2 is other courses that can back up to that.
And can I just ask, I think I missed the reasoning for like taking away the lab, like because now we're not in COVID, or is that
Part of it is that, and part of that is scheduling. With more students coming in, I need to be more selective with our time in our courses that students are demanding. So that's one of those. And with regards to looking at the requirements of the course and making sure that everybody in 10th grade, particularly all 10th graders who are taking English, whether they take an AP course or not, are getting the same credit for that course as is done at the other levels with English in 9th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade. I don't think I mentioned that before, but that was also another reason, equity, making sure that everybody had the same credits to make it equitable across all students.
Just to build on that, Dr. Scragan, and Anya, it's a reasonable question. I think one of the things we did a couple of years ago was did an audit of all the surrounding school districts and how many credits were assigned to particular courses, particularly in AP, and making sure that we are balanced with the districts around us and in line with what the College Board is recommending. So the College Board recommends this course to be a 1-credit course. We had during a period of time made it 1.5, but nobody else was doing that. This puts us back in line with where it belongs, frees up time in student schedules, and ensures that we're in alignment with other districts around us. So there was like sort of a trifecta of reasoning. Good questions. You guys are asking great questions today. This is excellent. Anything else around the high school program of studies before we move on?
No, thank you. No.
Good to move forward, and is Dr. Scragan approved to share it out?
Yes.
Yes.
In that process. Excellent.
I also just wanted to say, I think there's such a benefit to having the students here today because they're like living this. and they're asking questions that I think us as adults would have no idea to ask. So I appreciate all the questions they've asked to help me understand better. But yes, I'm okay with you going ahead.
Mrs. Hubley, and I agree with you. I think there's some text coming through about how proud we are of the student participation, because this is exactly why you're here, is to weigh in. And I suspect you'll have more to say on some of the other subjects we're about to talk about in just about 10 seconds. So great stuff. Dr. Scragen, Dr. Rittenhouse, while we're always happy to have you, I also understand if you have another date with your time this afternoon. We appreciate you being with us today.
Thanks for the students online. I was the one texting Dr. J about how smart and proud I am of all of our students. They're great questions. So you're living it. So we appreciate it, and I will see everybody tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Our next program proposal for you builds on some of the conversation we started to have last year in this committee around our math school course sequence. Our middle school math course sequence. And today I have for you, I've brought for you Dr. Mangano, Mr. Payne, Ms. Bechtel, and Ms. Gutschall, members of our middle school team. And they are going to share with you their recommendations for how we'd like to proceed with a math sequencing in middle school. Dr. Mangano, I believe I'm turning it over to you first. Is that right?
Yes, please.
And you'll let me know when you're ready for me to advance slides.
Yes. So thank you for everyone having us here today. Really proud to kick off our middle school team. I want to begin the first slide by just saying it's an honor to work with dedicated staff and a dedicated department chair who's here today, as well as an assistant principal and a coach. And I think it just is an example, a small example of the type of people we have here that are truly just passionate in ensuring that we not only meet the needs of our diverse learners, but we do so by honoring the growing needs of the social emotional children that we face at the middle level, because as many of you on the call know, this can be a quite a bumpy ride, but one that we take on gladly. And I think while we're trying to provide an academic instruction that meets their needs, we're also dealing with the ups and downs of just the whole child. So really glad to be here today and talk a little bit about math in terms of really what we're doing and why we're doing it. And as Dr. Johnston mentioned, really looking at the sequencing and the alignment of what we're offering to students to launch them onto from sixth grade and beyond, right? Sounds like a little Buzz Lightyear in here, but that we really want to do so in the most solid way possible. So we have the luxury of receiving students from that K through 4, K-5 world, and really getting them ready and road ready for the high school. So this first slide talks a little bit about why we're doing what we're doing. And truly, as a new principal here and coming in and having initial conversations with Liz and saying like, okay, how are we servicing the needs of our middle school students in math, and really looking at what is that process, and coming to find out we were sort of asking more questions than we were coming up with answers. So that led us to a lot of thinking, all right, what are we doing and why? Really what we're looking at is, and what we kind of came across was some of our sequencing and programming was really not research based. It was kind of, it first existed as a response, which we thought was a response to ensuring how we prepared students for high level math in high school. When in reality, the more we sort of dug into that and the more we looked at data and the more we looked at the pathways that kids were taking, we could do a whole lot better of a job for not just a group of students, but all students, really making sure that all students have that ability to access higher level material, really making sure also that we provide that solid foundation. So we're really going to talk a little bit about in these next coming slides of how we're going to do that. Additionally, as you all know as well, we're beginning a construction project, and sort of in that construction project, reimagining a little bit about how we want to build a schedule that, again, is driven by the needs of our students. And that may be meaning we're going to be looking at time and how we spend our time. And likely what will happen is, as we look to, as an example, If we look to have science and social studies on a daily basis, science very related to our math, we have to do so by looking at minutes and how many minutes we provide in that course of a day for students. So all of that being that those all have an impact on the way that we deliver the instruction that we need to deliver. I'm also pleased to say that when we look at the next couple of slides, I think it also aligns very well with the goals of the district. So portrait of a graduate, really lending itself to critical thinking, collaborative work with each other, and really kind of creating what we're going to look at as creative problem solvers. Again, excited that the high school students are here because I think what we're going to be talking about is ways that will really help prepare our students for the future ahead in math. And you can go to the next slide, please. I'm turning it over to Liz.
Yes, thanks, Amy.
Yep.
Hi, my name is Liz Gutschall, and I serve both as a 7th grade math teacher, which I'm so excited to see some of my friends from COVID days on here. Never thought I'd see on Zoom again. And I'm also the middle school math department coordinator. So as a department, Amy mentioned that we've been conducting a review of our curriculum and our instructional pacing. Currently, and you can see this in our diagram here, 6th grade students have the opportunity to complete 2 years worth of math curriculum in a single year. While many students manage to keep up with this accelerated pace, they are simultaneously navigating significant transitions during this time as well, like adjusting to a new building, managing homework, switching between multiple teachers and classes during a day, understanding grades and report cards, and just learning how to be a successful student in the secondary school environment. So with this high level of transition and curriculum compacting, we've observed that students often miss the deeper meaning behind mathematical concepts. They are racing through the material rather than developing a strong foundational understanding. We believe that realigning our pathways, we can provide all 6th grade students with the time they need to grasp these fundamental concepts more deeply while also adjusting to the demands of navigating middle school. We believe that this realignment will better prepare all our students for future success and all accelerated pathways. As you'll see in some of these upcoming slides, all students will still be able to continue to have these opportunities to reaching the highest level of math that the high school has to offer. I'll pass it off.
Next slide, please.
Hi, I'm Kelly Bechtel. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the priorities that Liz talked about earlier. In that when we think about realigning and realigning the sequence of our math offerings, we focused a lot on the adolescent learner and what that student's going through in the middle school. And so we considered 3 big ideas: developmental readiness, the impact on our math community, and conceptual understanding. Liz talked a little bit about the developmental readiness. So we're not just considering the cognitive readiness, the ability to do the math, but we're also considering the need to balance the emotional changes and social impact that middle school brings. This is a big transition time for a 5th to 6th grader, and they're facing a lot of new things, not only themselves and their own bodies, but like Liz said, lots of teachers, changing classes, new school experiences, after school clubs, grades, and friend groups. All of this has an impact on their readiness and their ability to balance workload, friendships, and balancing their social emotional health. Another goal we have is developing math identity and community within our classrooms. We want to grow students' math identity so they see themselves both as learners and leaders in a math classroom, and flexibly moving between those as they work with diverse learners and a diverse group of students in there. That's how we can grow and develop our math community, where students have an identity as both learner and leader. And finally, I think Liz said this too, is that the priority is on conceptual understanding versus procedural fluency. We understand the need for procedural fluency, but with an accelerated course in grade 6, 7, students don't have multiple opportunities to develop their conceptual understanding. So what this looks like would be things like modeling real world situations with mathematics, creating mathematical arguments and justifications, and then like connecting between ideas, connecting these ideas between topics and understanding the relationships deeply.
I was going to say, Kelly, if I can add to that, I think what we're looking at too is instead of going, wider, faster, we're going deeper, longer, and allowing like real true rigor to take place and to unfold, and productive struggle to occur. So I just, that to me, that concept just rings a bell in terms of going like, okay, we can go wide and fast really quick. And at the end, we might have missed something along the way, but by doing this approach, we're going deeper and allowing that true, I think, productive struggle and grit all come together. Thank you. And next slide, please.
So I think one of the things that's important to consider while we reframe this and realign our sequence is that our sixth graders are our youngest learners. They're 11 years old. And in the current system, we've been taxing them with 2 years of mathematics. And those 2 years conceptually don't overlap and intertwine with each other. One of the things that we're looking to realign here is that accelerated session will still exist at the middle school, but we're going to look to incorporate it in the 7th grade year where it's a math 7-8, where those two sets of standards really do align and they really do they overlap and intertwine in a way that makes sense. Most of the publications that make math resources, they do an accelerated math program in grade 7 for 7-8. For this exact purpose, because you can cover the topics in an integrated way that math 6-7 is not. We're just putting 2 years of concepts together in math 6-7. It's a homemade curriculum that we currently use. So what we're looking at is changing the year in which we do the acceleration in the larger sense. We'll still accommodate for learners of all types in any year. We're looking to create a data system that would help us create those class rosters, which we haven't had here. So what you're looking at on this slide is moving forward in our realigned math sequence, 6th grade students would come to us, or 5th grade students would come to us for 6th grade and take Envision Math 6. That would be a heterogeneous math class for all of our math classes in 6th grade. And then we would do a screening process starting in January. About almost halfway through the school year, we would have data for 6th grade learners on 6th grade standards in math that is helpful and predictive for success in pre-algebra and algebra and higher level math classes. We would combine that data that we collected in 6th grade with 4th and 5th grade data we have in Linkit to create a data profile for students. That would give us a large chunk of students in 6th grade to give a pre-algebra readiness test to. And those results would help us build the class rosters for our 7th grade Math 7-8 course. We would have a family and counselor consultation at that point to share this data. And we would then take our 6th grade cohort and make sections of Envision 7, which would be our grade level math, and our sections of Math 7-8, our accelerated math course. I think the thing that's important to us too is to say out loud, like when we look at those standardized test scores, when kids score proficient on those exams, that's telling us, proficiency is telling us that student is on pace to be grade, that they're showing proficiency in the grade level standards for that year, right? So we're looking at really trying to dig through this data to find our advanced learners and use that data to build these rosters. In 7th grade, we would have sections of Envision Math 7 and Math 7-8. We would do the same process in January. We would pull the data from their last 3 years. We would take their winter Linkit data from 7th grade. We would then issue an algebra readiness test to them instead of a pre-algebra in 7th grade. And then we're looking at making algebra rosters for 8th graders. Next slide, please. This is the visualization of all of the ways, well, most of the ways, most of the ways students would travel through the middle school and then the high school in their course sequencing. And what you're going to see is a traditional path and then the possible accelerated high school math path. And these are the extremes. The first line that goes all the way across in yellow, that is the most conservative and traditional path for a student in our school district that they would have. And then that second line that stems from the traditional middle school path, that second high school, that's the most aggressively possible math schedule that they could have, doubling up and accelerating themselves through the math courses. There are permutations between those two lines in every way possible, right? Where you could double up once. You could skip your 10th grade year and then do math 11th and 12th. There's lots of ways that this could be rearranged. But what we show in this picture is the most conservative and the most aggressive way that you could build a math schedule over the course of your 7 years as a secondary student. And then if you pop down to line 3 and 4, it's the same picture, but it is if you took the 7th grade accelerated math course in middle school, what does your path look like? Well, you could take 3 years of math in the most conservative way, which would be geometry, algebra 2, and trig and pre-calc, or you could pop down to line 4, and that's the most aggressive way that you could potentially schedule your life as a math student. And then there's permutations between those two as well. And
I think the bottom line with this slide too is that knowing that nothing we're doing limits or prohibits pathways for kids. And I think to Jason's point, we will continue to still provide for students as we need to, however that pops up.
right. Next slide, please.
Can I just ask a quick
Val,
question
go
while
ahead.
we're on this
Yes.
slide? Sorry. So I just want to make sure I understand. So for example, like where it says spring and there's nothing in the box, does that
Mhm.
mean then they only have to take 3 maths, like 3 semesters, not a whole year?
Correct. So you need 3 math credits as a high school student for graduation. For some math classes, they're offered year long. Some of them are semester only. But if you're, they're still a credit apiece, right, Scott? Credit apiece for year long and semester. And so in the most conservative picture, yes, you would only take 3 maths over the course of your 8 semesters as a high school student.
So when you talked about aggressive, the student would take, what is that, 8? No, sorry, 7 maths instead of 3.
That junior year is 1 course, but it's year long.
Okay.
But yeah, that would be the most aggressive. You could get the most math classes in on that path.
And what does MVC stand for?
That is multivariable calculus.
Ooh, okay.
My sentiments
us,
exactly.
for us math people, we love that. Like I did that as a high school student too. And so Dr. Mangano's point is, I want to bring back up to the front. No matter where the acceleration happens at the middle school level or not at all, it doesn't matter that the availability of these courses for our kids is wide open no matter which path you take here as a middle school student, which is done on purpose. We want that. That's an intentional move by us.
Hubly.
So I just wanted to clarify, you're taking geometry completely out of the middle school.
Traditionally speaking, yes. Now, like we said a couple of times, if we, because this is going to be data driven, here's what can happen. We could get an incoming group of 5th graders, right? And halfway through 6th grade, we build those data profiles and we see a large group of exceptional students. We have the ability to accelerate it and package it. And we could end up with geometry for 8th graders. If we had data to support, we had kids that we should build that for. We're going to keep that as an always.
Okay.
Yeah, the data will drive, to your point and question, the data will drive the decision, not the other way around where we're just going to have a course and look to fill it. So I think what we really want to be able to do is make decisions based on the needs of our kids, not just this is the course that's standing here, we got to fill it. And there's always going to be an outlier. There always is. We're going to create a path and somebody's going to challenge the path, which is kind of exciting for us, and then we have to build that path for that particular student. We've got a few now that are outside of the box. And, that's the most exciting thing about a middle school. We can do that. So, and we will.
I was just going to say, like, to get to multivariable calculus in high school, you really have to double up to get there, and that's also a lot to ask of high school students who are playing higher level sports and you know what I mean? So like, that's what I look at as a parent of students who have taken that path. And, Dr. Johnson knows I've already had this argument in past academic affairs meetings. So I am glad to hear that the idea that you can take geometry in middle school isn't completely off the table. And I understand, and I also would tell you, like, as a middle school counselor, like, I understand what you're all saying about the readiness of students and where they are. So I see both sides of that coin.
I think what I really hope that the members of the committee are hearing, and Dr. Teretusky, I see your hand. I'll make my comment and then pass it to you. I want you to see that what we're trying to do is align what we know about student development, brain research, and their readiness for those more abstract comments. One of the things that we didn't have time to talk about is how we got here, which also included interviews with prior students who took some of those courses. And so the number of kids who are currently registered for multivariable calculus, Mrs. Hubley, is I think 10. And so when we're making decisions about getting to multivariable calculus and we're talking about 10 students, I think we want to put in comparison to the 200 in a cohort, that the students who actually want to get that far, who've been accelerated in the past, their choice is a very small number of students, and they're going to do it because that's what they want. And if that exists as a cohort in 8th grade, then so be that. But many students are giving up 2 full credits of high school mathematics at the middle level for where they cannot get credit, and having to take extra courses that may not actually be of interest or what they want to spend their time on because they're required to have 3 maths at the high school.
And I would just to add to what you just said,
I
imagine the students, I don't imagine, I know, because I know who's in multivariable calculus this year, are the kids who are in the gifted program, starting in elementary school. And so I understand that is a small group of people, and, and each year you're not going to know what that group of kids is, but I just wouldn't want them to not have that opportunity. That's my point of what I'm saying.
We want every pathway open. I think we just want to be really strategic and use what we know about most kids to drive our core programming, knowing that we have the ability to diversify in adding extra supports where we need it for those students in those years, or accelerating for others when we need it, but opening up that range and variation. Dr. Teretusky.
Thanks. So just a couple of, I guess, thoughts I want to share. First, I appreciate that you're rethinking the middle school math pathway. I think this is, speaking from having a student who had the intellectual skills to handle some advanced math, but didn't have student skills to do that. I hear you balancing some of those developmental aspects that can be unequal in middle level students. So I truly appreciate that. And you mentioned, the idea of how we got here. And I guess those were some of my questions of like, at this point, how many students have received geometry in the middle school? What do those numbers look like? What does their progress look like? Like, I like to understand a little bit more about the, how we got here, but you don't certainly have to discuss that today. We can, plan another time to do that. I know our time is limited, but I appreciate the thoughtfulness in the discussion, but would be interested to know kind of what those comments were, what the feedback was, the numbers, et cetera, to bring us here to this. So
sure. We can bring you back that report and provide some more in-depth response, because I think that would be helpful. I do think we shared, and I can't remember, Dr. Teretusky, whether you were with us at the time last year when we had this discussion. You might not have yet rejoined us, taking a look at that our ratios were getting out of balance compared to anyone else we knew. At its highest, we were accelerating somewhere between 50 to 55% of the incoming 6th graders. And that had gotten a little out of line. I'm trying to say it respectfully. Like, it wasn't working long term. We were having increasing numbers of students seeking support outside of school. They were finding tutors in order to keep up, because we have good kids who want to do well and they don't want to disappoint. But the overall cost to their well-being was becoming concerning. And as Mrs. Gutschall spoke to, she's right. Students were getting to geometry without a really solid understanding, because in 6th grade, they were doing 6th grade math in the first semester and 7th grade math in the second second semester, and the abstract concepts of 7th grade mathematics. Mrs. Gutschall, we both know I'm not a math teacher, but I'm going to try my best, but you're going to fix me if I miss it, right? The concepts and the understanding was not rushed through on purpose, but it's a year-long course to really substantively dig in. And secondarily, as Dr. Mangano referenced, right now we have 80 minutes of mathematics, but the cost of that 80 minutes of math every day to do that work and to do that geometry in 8th grade, Mrs. Hubley, is with 80 minutes of time. But going forward, in order to also receive adequate and daily instruction in social studies and science, we have to realign the schedule back to a more traditional, even distribution of the courses. And so these two things are happening in tandem. That's really how we got here, was the in tandem concerns, realignment, and then sort of at what cost. Those conversations, given everything that we know and what we are watching kids sort of experience, and that the idea in 6 and 7 seems okay. It's the long-term implications. And even some of our high school teachers talking about when kids were getting to algebra 2 and really just not being able to build on they had a sort of Swiss cheese foundation. Not all, I'm not saying that, but enough of it that was coming back as feedback. I'm overstating it, but that's the story that Hannah was painted. Does that help?
That's very helpful. Thank you very much. I really appreciate hearing that, and makes great sense. Yes.
May I just add one quick comment? I apologize.
Can I let Anya ask her
Yep.
question?
Yep, sure.
Anya, go ahead. You were waiting very patiently. Why was yammering?
I was just wondering if this gets rid of Calc AB and then Calc BC as two separate courses, because like I know that Calc ABBC is like, even though that might be like possible for those students who want to go really accelerated, like it is a really difficult class that's every day for the whole year. And I was just wondering how students would go if they wanted to take those courses and like maybe get to multivariable but didn't want to. It's also like a big schedule blocker to put an ABBC into like the 4 periods a day.
Dr. Scragan, I'm going to speak for you and and then I'm going to suggest that, well, we can always circle back to this conversation, so you'll correct me. Anya, there are some implications of the middle school decisions for upper grades in the 11th and 12th grade, not only in mathematics, but also in science. So, but we have to be really careful in thinking about what's best for middle schoolers, being informed by what's good for high schoolers, but we can't not do what's good for middle schoolers because of what might happen in high school. And I think we're trying really carefully to walk that line between the two. It's a really important question, but once we sort of get some approval to move forward, the follow-up conversations will be with the math and science departments at the high school. What are some options we have? What are some ways we might resequence? Other school districts have chosen to put different courses in different plan. And so we need to first do the first step in order to do the second step. Does that make sense? But you're asking really important questions. Sophia?
Thank you. So I actually remember attending a meeting with Mr. Payne about this. So I do have a little bit of background knowledge, but I remember you saying something about how a lot of the 6th graders put in the accelerated program didn't feel as like ready. So could you just kind of elaborate more on like the selection process for these 6th graders going into accelerated programs and maybe like any adjustments you would consider making as opposed to this like possible route?
Yes. I'm trying to figure out, Mr. Payne, do you want to start that answer?
Yes, but I want to ask who asked the question? Sophia, can you restate the question a little bit? Are you asking for us to give you more insight into how we're going to go through the data collection profile?
More so just the current data collection for choosing which 6th graders go into accelerated programs, because I know that's like our current.
You mean currently? Like, so how did the kids who are there right now get there? Is that what your question is, Sophia?
Okay. Yes, it is. Thank you.
Of course.
There was not a system. There was a chart and a spreadsheet that Erdenheim would share with the middle school. Unfortunately, the person who did the most work in that process is no longer here. Like I wasn't involved into this until this fall. So like I didn't experience this as a user, right? So I'm giving you secondhand knowledge. But there was a spreadsheet of 5th graders shared with the middle school. There was some non-standardized data points put in that, like chapter tests and grades and such. There was some teacher recommendations from the variety of fifth grade teachers that had fifth grade students. And there was, we were often fielding parent requests for like, I think that's a way that we had such inflated numbers at one point here, is we were just taking family requests for accelerated math and building that into their schedule. So it really wasn't driven specifically on math performance and capacity and performance. It was more choice and a lot of adults trying to figure it out to build out the class rosters versus looking at the student, looking at their work habits, looking at their math data, and then building a course roster based around that.
Mr. Payne. Last but not least, we have one final slide for the math presentation. I knew we would have a lot of questions, so that's why I put this one in the middle of the conversation so we would be able to get to it. But we have one other topic after this. I'm trying to get my computer to forward. I'm not sure why. Hold on a second. Oh, I'm in the wrong thing. Hold on. There we go.
And then our
Technical
last slide was we started thinking about like, what are we going to do next to communicate the plan to all of the peoples, right? So in March, we would edit the middle school curriculum guide for language that matches this. In April, we already have April 30th slated as our annual fifth grade parent night at the middle school. We bring the families and the students in, and we kind of give them a preview as to your transition coming to middle school. We would be obviously adding this into our presentation, but 2 days before that, we would send an informational letter home to families in fifth grade so that they could come to that fifth grade parent night with some background knowledge about the realigned math sequence, and we would be prepared to, field questions and talk about it. In May, we would be done our data collection and our assessments, and we would have rosters ready, and so we would be having our counselors at the middle school reaching out to families to talk about your math placement. That's a thing that we haven't done here. We haven't outwardly communicated, here's information about your student and their data, other than send home the piece of paper with your PSSA scores on it. So we would add that as a piece of our puzzle in May, so that in the spring, you would know where your fifth grader would be placed in terms of math for next year as a sixth grader. And then August, the schedules come out. And then at the end of August, we have an annual new student orientation for incoming sixth graders and any seventh or eighth grade student who's new to our building. Again, we would be talking about it in front of families at orientation as well. So we would have, the eBlast capabilities and the posting online, the curriculum guide, letters home, and a bunch of face-to-face opportunities to talk about it. And then there's lots of layers to this, but appeal processes for families is built into this plan. We have assessments ready. We've done a little tinkering with those assessments already, some trial runs and looking at the data. So that would be our communication plan.
Mr. Payne. Dr. Aberle?
So thinking about students at the other end of the spectrum and that kind of like thoughtful plan that's put together by the high school with respect to children with special educational needs, where it looks like there's either it already exists and it's not included here, or it would be nice to see something around what does that translation look like from the elementary into middle school and then up to high school for those students that won't be receiving this type of instruction. And I would say, especially around the communication plan, as a parent with a child with special educational needs, sometimes it gets very frustrating that a lot of the communications come out that are not applicable to your child. And so you're always following up with, oh, what do I do about this? Where does my student fit into this landscape of math? And it can be anything like, if your child has an IEP or is in this particular cohort, don't worry, your case manager will be reaching out separately and we will do something completely different, like however that's set up. But I think there's always this like, okay, so this doesn't apply to my kid, but where does my kid fit into this as a landscape and a program? I think that would just, it's obviously going to probably be very individualized. I like the idea of, a lot of the things that have been done in middle school are those kind of very functional type activities. Math is going to be about how do I count money, those types of things. But it'd be nice just to kind of like call that out. I appreciate that a lot of what you're presenting are things that are like changes that are being made. But certainly with the communication, it would be at least nice to kind of have that buttoned up.
Dr. Dennis and Dr. Mangano, I'm going to ask that you take that feedback as we get ready to work on the revisions to the curriculum guide for the middle school and take a look at whether there's a way in which we can help to make that a little bit more transparent, what the offerings are and how they fit in together. And then bring that back when we present the middle school curriculum guide. I think that would be helpful, not only to Dr. Aberle, but our community in general. Dr. Aberle, does that work?
That sounds perfect. Thank you.
I was actually thinking about that, Dr. Johnson, from both ends of the spectrum, as I think that's where it just has to be communicated, as you said, and made clear, which we can do. Yep.
And
Excellent.
Can I just share quickly, Dr. Johnson, we have started that work. So we are starting to vet out what special education instruction, what the programming looks like at the middle school, so we can do some more forward facing, and same process here, putting data behind it. How do we make those decisions about where students are appropriately placed? So we are beginning that process. I think by the time middle school brings their course guide, we'll have some of that vetted out for you.
There was a nice alignment between that and the segue to our next agenda item. So related to the mathematics discussion for the middle school, I just want to get confirmation from our adult board members to start with, comfort with us continuing to move forward with planning and rolling this out as we talked about tonight.
That's fine. I'm in agreement.
Excellent.
Yeah, I agree. I think use the data, right? Collect the data, use the data. Absolutely on board with that.
Said by the scientist. Awesome.
I'm going to agree with Lee with that, though. I also agree, use the data to
100%.
Help you.
I'm good.
Great. All right, middle school team, excellent work. I appreciate all of you being here, particularly those of you who are not administrators and gave up some of your own time this evening to be with us. I really do appreciate that. Thank you very much. You are welcome to stay and listen into the rest of the conversation. And I also understand if you have something else keeping your attention this evening.
Thank you very much.
Our last primary topic for the evening that we really needed to get to is Dr. Dennis and Mrs. Schrager here to present a proposal for our special education plan. I'll remind our board members that we come back to you every 3 years with components of our comprehensive plan, which are staged. And because of the luck of the draw, special education is up this year. And so Dr. Dennis and Mrs. Schrager, I'm going to pass it to you.
Thank you. Yes. So and you can go to the next slide. I think we have a title slide twice, so you can skip right through all that. So every 3 years, we do have to create or complete an update to our special education plan. So one of the steps that I took this year in doing that work is establishing a committee with wide representation from general education staff, special education staff, some specialists joined our team, parents, board members, administrators, both at the building level and at the central office level. So we've met several times to review the different sections of the special education plan, talk about, what has changed from 3 years to now, what do we need to add to our plan that didn't exist before, what has maybe changed in regards to how we need to put that information together. So this first slide is just a shout out to the people who took time out of their lives to join us and really do some really great, thoughtful conversation around our special education services in the district. So you can go to the next slide, Dr. Johnson. Thank you. So just really quickly, what is a special education plan? As Dr. Johnson said, it's part of the comprehensive plan requirements. So every 3 years, we have to update this document. It includes several sections related to how we identify students, how we service students that maybe need services beyond what's in our school buildings, how we provide professional development. our staffing structures. So it goes on to a bunch of different categories, which we'll go through as we go through this plan. But it really gets into the procedures of how we implement our special education programs for students, and ensures that we are considering and always operating from that standpoint of the least restrictive environment. So how do we allow students to be in their general education curriculum to the greatest extent possible? And it also will include sections that really outline our staffing and our special education location allocations across the district. So our speech and language, OT, PT, how we're operating all those different services through special education. Go to the next slide. The first section of the special education plan is called the improvement and planning section. So PDE uses our annual district data to identify areas of improvement. So there are thresholds set by PDE that we have to meet in regards to different areas of data. So I included some of those different areas on here. So they look at discipline rates of special education students. They also look at disproportionality rates, so the rate in which we might be disciplining or identifying special education students who are minorities. It goes into evaluation and service data, assessment data, and it also looks at resolution and mediation data. So those would be examples of times that parents are filing for due process and we go to hearing, or times that parents are requesting mediation and we go to mediation. So all of that data gets looked at. We have only 2 areas over a very extensive list. So I think good news for the district, and a pat on the back for our special education staff and building administrators. We've only been identified in 2 areas. The first being participation. So this has to do with how many of our special education students are participating in state assessments. So if you take a look at the chart I circled there, our 8th grade ELA score did not meet the threshold, our 8th grade math and our 11th grade math. So those were the 3 targets that we did not meet. However, I listed at the bottom, the data is always lagging. So the data that was used to determine whether or not we were on the improvement list for this special education plan is coming from 2022, 2023. What I noticed when I started going through this plan, this area was noted in the last special education plan as well. And the district did a lot of work between that last plan and this plan coming due to make changes to increase our participation. And they have been very successful. So the numbers in the last plan were pretty high for opt-outs. I think we had maybe 4 or 5 special education students last year opt out. So I do believe that once the data catches up another year, this will not be an area that we are indicated for improvement again, but we are on there now. So what we'll do is, part of the special ed plan is we'll develop a plan to address it. A lot of the plan that we put together is really just staying the course. We are promoting the importance of the testing for our families. We're working with families who have questions about whether or not students should take those assessments. And I think the district has done a really nice job of reducing those numbers. And I anticipate that if we continue to implement the improvements that we already have, we will not be on this improvement list again next year. So you can go to the next page. The second area under improvement and planning that we did not meet all the targets for was proficiency. So again, related to our state assessment data, if you take a look, there are 3 grade levels in which we did not meet all the targets. The first being 11th grade ELA, 4th grade math, 8th grade math. Those are the 3 areas where our special education students did not meet the target percentage for proficiency. So what we'll do with that, and what the team worked on, was thinking about ways in which we can support the increase in proficiency for our students who are receiving special education services. So one of the things that we are going to work on, if you take a look at those bullets on the left-hand side, we are going to continue to disaggregate data for students in special education to make sure that we are identifying and targeting any trends or patterns in where students are not solid in their math learning, so that we can be strategic in filling those gaps. Another area that we have started to work on that we're going to continue to solidify is implementing consistent progress monitoring tools. So being able to see where students are in their math instruction, provide intervention, and then monitor that growth. I think one of the things that we have to really continue to grow on as a department is making sure that we are monitoring growth in a consistent manner. Sometimes using those curriculum-based assessments don't allow us to really dig down into the skills that some of our students with special education needs haven't mastered yet. So we want to implement that so that we can do a better job of determining whether our interventions are effective, because we don't want to keep doing the same things if it's not leading students to grow in their skills. Additionally, we really want to work on some professional development opportunities in reading and math, and you'll see that later in our PD section of the special education plan. So focusing on bringing some research-based tools in for teaching math, remediating math, working on that for students and teachers, and the same with reading. So, we really want to work on those science of reading skills with our special education staff. We want those teachers to really be skilled in helping students build in those deficit areas for reading and math. And we think that'll help target some increasing our rate of students who are proficient on our state assessments. And then we're continuing to develop a resource guide. One thing that in my first year and a half here in the district, there's variability in what tools teachers know that they have access to. So we want to make sure that we provide some consistent access to all teachers and that we bring some continuity between our elementary, our middle, and our high school levels so that students can continue to progress with some good, strong research-based intervention across all levels. And we think by doing that, we can again close this gap in students' scores for our special education students. Go to the next slide. There are some sections that I'm not going to spend a ton of time on, and I shared this with our special ed plan team too. There are sections that are really driven by the PA school code and federal law. So, we follow that and we continue to follow that with some small variations, but we don't make, sweeping additions or changes to these sections in the special ed plan. And the first of that is the identification. So there are two ways to identify students for specific learning disabilities in the state of Pennsylvania. One is the discrepancy model, where there's a discrepancy between what we know about the student's cognitive skills and their academic performance. And the second way is through the MTSS or the RTI MTSS process. You have to be state approved to do that. So we are not state approved to use the MTSS RTI process, which really is about doing a lot of tier 2, tier 3 intervention, doing a lot of progress monitoring on those areas. And when you don't see students making progress, you can make the case that they qualify for special education services for SLD. We don't have that approved model here. We use the discrepancy model. That'll stay the same in our special ed plan. The next two sections are non-resident and incarcerated youth. The state requires us to make sure that we have a plan around how we make sure students get quality education if they are in a residential treatment facility for, mental health purposes, medical purposes, that we are continuing to educate them. And we follow the 1306 law policy around that to make sure students are receiving their education when they are in treatment, and the same for incarcerated youth. So we follow the regulations that we are required to support students educationally when they are out. We used to have a 1306 facility, Carson Valley, in our district catchment. And so that required us to fill out different or more parts of this part of the special education plan, but that 1306 facility is no longer operating. So our 1306 section will be a little bit shorter and a little bit tighter because when we had a 1306 facility, we were responsible for making sure all the students in that facility were being educated appropriately. So we are no longer, that organization is no longer running a residential treatment facility within our catchment. So that'll change that section slightly. The next section is intensive interagency. And so this is really just about, when we have students who have really complex needs, how do we place them? How do we make sure that there aren't disruptions to their education if we can't service them here in the district? We don't historically have an issue with finding appropriate placements for students with complex needs. And I think that's a testament to the relationships that get built here. We work closely with the MCIU, who has access to programs and have relationships across the county. We also develop and build and maintain relationships with private placements. So we work with them regularly. We have students out in those facilities. Mrs. Schrage does a really nice job of maintaining contact, making sure we understand what services different private schools provide so that we can make sure we're putting students in a right fit if we should need to explore educational placements outside of the school district. And the last is the least restrictive environment section. So again, our job is to make sure that we're educating students in their least restrictive environment, that they're accessing general education to the greatest extent possible. We do that through our MTSS framework. We do that through our tiered intervention and data collection for students to make those decisions and ensure that we're keeping students in general ed to the greatest extent possible. Go to the next slide. The next section is about positive behavior support. So the special education plan requires us to have a plan around how we ensure that students behaviorally don't have barriers that are keeping them from accessing curriculum. So first and foremost for that is we make sure that we have staff appropriately trained in de-escalation and restraint. You'll see in our later slide, restraint is a last resort and really only is for students that are presenting just in that moment as a safety risk to themselves or others. But part of that is using a research-based training system that includes both de-escalation and restraint. So we do a more wide training on de-escalation practices. So that is how do we engage with students who might be feeling either stress and anxiety, anger, frustration, sadness, or depression. So how do we help those students and de-escalate situations that might be high stress? And then as a last resort, how do you safely provide restraint to students who might be a danger to themselves or others? Our building level supports is we're using restorative practices K-12. We have social emotional instruction for all students. So at our core 1 level, everybody is having an opportunity to learn strategies around managing frustration, anxiety, and feelings of sadness. So we're teaching that to all students so that we can then tier that intervention as needed. And we have class and building incentives. So each of our buildings have expectations laid out. They have incentives in their building for students who are meeting those expectations, all to, again, reinforce those school skills that we want all of our students to exhibit so that they can get their academic instruction. We also conduct functional behavior assessments. If you're not familiar with what those are, it's a series of observations where we identify behaviors of concern. So what are the things students are exhibiting that might be impacting their access to instruction? And then we look at what might be happening before those events that might be reinforcing it, and what is happening after those events that might be reinforcing that behavior. So we do a systematic data collection on that. We analyze that data, and then we use that information to build positive behavior support plans, which you'll see in the next bullet, that are really targeted to addressing the antecedents and addressing those consequences. So the stuff that's happening before and after. How can we change things on those two ends to change the behavior? So that's what the functional behavior assessment allows us to understand. And then we build that positive behavior support plan to support those changes in behavior that we're looking for. Students also have behavioral goals as part of their IEP. So if that's an area students are working on, we're writing those goals and we're monitoring their progress. We also staff 2 BCBAs, and they support us in conducting functional behavior assessments. They also support us in writing those positive behavior support plans and coaching and consulting with teachers and staff on how to implement those. And lastly, we increased, one of the things that we'll add to our special ed plan is we increased emotional support services at our elementary level. So we have teachers there that are able to provide itinerant support to students all the way through a supplemental full-time model if needed for students. So we've increased our capacity to service students across that continuum. Again, we have to share our restraint procedures in our special education plan. As I stated before, it is a last resort, and it really is only to keep people physically safe. So if we see a danger to that, then that is the only time that we would use a physical restraint. If we are using a physical restraint, we have, well, first and foremost, we want our IEP teams to follow our specially designed instruction and our procedures that are outlined in the positive behavior support plans. So again, if we've done a nice FBA and we understand the things happening before the behavior and we understand the things happening after, we're hopefully shaping our environment and our interactions with students so that we're not getting to behaviors that would be unsafe. So that's where we always start. We only have certain staff that are restraint trained, so it's not something that's, we are training everybody in. So we really have a select group of people who understand the severity of a situation to determine whether or not a restraint is necessary or not. And as required by law, we inform parents of any physical restraints that are required in the school setting, and parents are offered an IEP meeting. Our hope would be that if a physical restraint is required, that the team is coming together to talk about what led to that and what we can be doing differently moving forward, to make sure that we don't need to continue to use physical restraint as a way of managing a student's behavior. So that might mean revising the IEP, revising the positive behavior support plan, to make sure that we're meeting those student's needs. The next section is really all about staffing. So I just laid out for you guys just a quick summation of the different special education staffing that we have across the district, breaking apart learning support from our lower incidence populations, which would be emotional support, our functional academic students, students with autism, students in our life skills programming. So at the elementary level, we have 6 learning support staff across Enfield and Erdenheim, and they're supporting students from a range of itinerant to supplemental. They're working with students who have reading needs, math needs, possibly executive functioning needs, and some social skills needs, depending on their level of need. And then from a low incidence standpoint, we have 4 total staff members. There are 2 emotional support teachers at Enfield and at Erdenheim, and 2 of our low incidence staff at both Enfield and Erdenheim. At the middle level, we have 5 special education staff. Again, they're servicing students in those academic areas, and they range from itinerant to supplemental support. And then we have 3 low incidence staff. So we have 1 emotional support teacher at the middle level and 2 low incidence teachers servicing our more complex learners. And lastly, at the high school, we have 6 staff in learning support, and we have 4 staff in our low incidence. We have 1 emotional support teacher and 3 low incidence teachers, which includes 1 of our teachers who really works with our 18 to 22 students in our transition program. And just to be clear, all of our staff are well within the state guidelines for caseload management. So we are not at risk of anybody being, over those state limits. So I think we have a nice balance at this time. And then one of the last sections of the special ed plan is just what are we going to do over the next 3 years to keep growing our department and their knowledge and expertise in the area of special education. So they break that up into specific categories. So these bolded sections on this slide and the next slide are predetermined by PDE. So they weren't just categories we pulled out of a hat. These are the categories that PDE wants us to specifically focus on in our PD plan. So I just gave some general outlines of where we want to go in the next 3 years as far as training. So from an autism perspective, we want to look at essentializing curriculum in our general education classes. This year, our teachers had a great opportunity to undergo some training on essential elements, which are elements that are derived from PASA, the alternative state assessment, but that really link directly to state standards. So we want to keep leveraging that wonderful resource to really help guide our instruction for students with special needs. We also want to support students with autism in general education, so not just with our special ed staff, but working with our general education staff on what are strategies and resources and tools that we can use in general education to support that success. And then we're going to continue working on our transition planning. So that section of the IEP that really talks about those post-secondary goals. For our paraprofessionals, sorry, Damien, I know there's 4 on this slide. I'll try to be brief. For our paraprofessionals, we really want to continue to support them with general education practices. So from an academic standpoint, how could they support students during their ELA time, during their math time? What are general strategies that they could be doing to support students in their academic knowledge, as well as those behavioral supports? We also want to support them in teaching some of those replacement behaviors. So that really focuses in on that positive behavior support plan. So how can we help them leverage those PBSPs, use that reinforcement to help students shape those behaviors? And we want to focus a little bit with them on the science of reading, just some of those general concepts around what we know about how students learn to read so that they can be an asset in those classrooms. The next section is positive behavior support. So we're really going to work on implementing PBSPs across all settings. So in general education and special education, we're going to continue working on our crisis intervention training. So looking at some ways to improve upon and enhance our de-escalation and restraint training, and then UDL practices. So we want to increase our students' engagement and compliance in courses. So how do we do that using that universal design model? And lastly, transition. So we are going to work on that transition grid, which again, if you're unfamiliar, there's a section in the IEP that lays out post-secondary goals and then steps for how we're going to meet them. And they call it the transition grid within the IEP. So we're going to really focus in with our special education staff about how are we writing meaningful goals and how are we back mapping that to make sure that we give students all the opportunities and interventions they need to meet those goals at the end. We also want to increase our staff's knowledge of the agency support that exists, so that that knowledge isn't being held by a small number of people, but more of our special ed staff understand and can communicate with families about the types of supports that are out in the community for students with special needs. And lastly, just giving some student agency in the transition grid. So how do we get students more involved and actively participating in their own post-secondary goals? And these are the last three sections. So you can see that PDE is also involved in the science of reading. They have a science of literacy section. So we are going to be working with our staff on supporting students with specific learning disabilities in the general ed classrooms. So looking at our co-teaching models, how can we improve some of those instructional strategies to close gaps for students? We also want to incorporate some more vocabulary understanding across the setting. So how do we incorporate vocabulary into our instruction, particularly when we are doing small group replacement instruction with students? How do we make sure we're still giving students access to high level vocabulary? Because what we know about reading is the more background information and vocabulary you have, the more proficient you are at comprehension. And lastly, we have started this process already, but we are going to continue to work on bringing some research-based phonics instruction across the district to add to what we already have in place. Parent training, we really want parents across the K-12 continuum to be more proficient in the transition plan, that transition grid. I think because the state only requires that starting at the age of 14, parents don't have, they don't know a lot about it in that elementary level. It's something that gets skipped because it's not required. And then when your child's 14, you're kind of on the back end of their special ed time in the district. So we want to make sure we're increasing that knowledge so parents know about it earlier, know what's to come, can be mindful and thoughtful about their child and how they're going to participate in that transition. We also had a lot of feedback about bridging programming from home to school. So particularly for students with positive behavior support plans, how can we make that bridge at home? How can parents be incorporating strategies in the home that we're incorporating here in the school setting? And lastly, we got a lot of feedback about the use of AAC devices. So those would be things like students who are using the iPads for talkers and other digital and technology that students are using in order to remove barriers so that they can access instruction. So we want to help parents get a deeper understanding of all the ways in which we can be leveraging high technology and low technology to help students access curriculum. I think we're getting close. All right. So our next steps. So once we're finished with our draft, we have one last special ed meeting where we're going to go through all the things that we've changed, and I'm going to make it look nice and pretty so we can review that together. We will provide a final draft to the school board in March. It has to go out for a 30-day review. So that's what will be approved in March, is that it's going out for its 30-day review. It'll be on our website for public to review. If they have comments, questions, or concerns, they can provide them to us. And then it will come back to the board for final approval in April, and then it will be submitted to PDE. PDE reviews it. If they have any questions or areas that they want us to clarify, they would reach back out to us. And then I think my last slide is just any questions anybody might have about the plan or what our vision is in the next 3 years for our special education department.
Dr. Dennis, I don't have any questions other than as the school board rep, as part of the discussion around the special ed plan committee, I felt like the conversation, the setup was really open and honest. You know, there was a lot of really good suggestion, a lot of engagement. I think, you know, just going back to probably something I mentioned earlier is like really just thinking about the data. I think there was a few things in the plan as we were looking through it where it was like, oh, you know, we're going to make changes based on something we're collecting, but it wasn't ever clear if that was ever completed, if that was ever shared. So I think, you know, and some of it is the format, like that document is really hard to like follow, but it's like a mandated, we can't change the format. And it's not very user friendly. And, you know, for most parents, it's probably like not that straightforward to follow and find sections and assimilate the data. But I think, you know, if there's something supplemental we can do to that so that it's really clear what the goals are, this is how we're going to measure them, this is like the timeline for delivering those data, I think that would be really, really helpful. We talked a little bit about that, but yeah, I think it's been a good high pace committee to be engaged in. So appreciate yours and Nicole's work on this.
Thank you.
Any other questions
I
or
don't have.
comments? Oh, hi, Karen. Go ahead. Dr. Chertowski,
Yeah,
go ahead.
that's okay. Yeah, that's okay. No, I don't have any questions. I know all that goes into the comprehensive plan for special education, and just want to thank you all for the work that you have done on that and the clarity that you're bringing to the plan. So again, thank you for all the work.
Absolutely.
Members of the Academic Affairs Committee comfortable with this proposed posting of this plan to go forward for a board motion in our March meeting for the 30-day posting?
Yes.
Yes, I am. Yeah. Mhm.
And then at some point, I need one of the three of you to volunteer to report out at the upcoming board meeting. So it's up to the three of you to do that.
I don't mind doing it. I did it last time. I know Amy had to do two reports yesterday, a repeat.
We did.
But yeah, I don't mind doing it if everyone's fine with that.
Great. I'll send you a draft to get you started.
That's fine. Thanks, Lee. Thanks.
Excellent. Dr. Dennis, Mrs. Schrage, excellent work. I appreciate all of your work and pulling this together. I know it's been a busy year anyway, and this just adds to the complexity, but I know it's really solid work and really sets our targets for where we're headed. And I think what's really important that I just want to bring together is the focus on really meeting students where they are, recognizing where that is, and then providing targeted, purposeful intervention to take them to the next step in their learning path. And so that is evident throughout what you presented, how important that is as a district, our next step to really solidifying our opportunities for all kids to meet their targets and their goals. So great job. Thank you.
And I just think just one more thing. And I think one of the issues that we saw, well, not really an issue, but I think we're victims of our own success. So we're seeing like a high proportion of students identified with special educational needs, and it's hard because it's hard to get the data, but some of that is probably purposefully people moving into the district to get that support. So it's a double-edged sword, but you know, a successful program has led to this.
I have shared that feedback with Dr. Yannicott in the past when we've discussed these very critical issues, as I did with her predecessor. You get a choice. You can either do great work and have people move in, or you can pick up costs in other ways if you don't do great work. So I'm proud to be on this side of the table where we're doing great work, meeting the students where we are, and if that makes us a destination district for some families. We have other reasons that families like choose to come here. And I think that that's a wonderful thing for our entire community. It makes us who we are. So I think that's something to celebrate. All right. As I mentioned to you, we initially intended to have another agenda item, which we have suspended, but I'm telling you what it is. We have the proposed 3-year calendars with a couple of changes. There are some glitches in looking at how 27-28 will come together. And we started a discussion with our administrators, but quite frankly, we ran out of time between the snow days and some other pressing issues. So we will bring that forward in March at our next academic affairs meeting. Before we talk about that, I just wanted to open it up to our committee, both sort of our elected board members and our student representatives. Any comments or questions on our overall content this evening that still needs to get addressed before we wrap up tonight?
No.
Anybody? Okay. Everyone's excellent attention. I appreciate it. Normally, I would open it up for public comment. This evening, there is no one joining us from the public to make a comment. Therefore, there will be no public comment. So that works out okay this evening. We do have 2 future meeting dates for sure, March 12th and April 23rd. I will send you calendar invitations, committee members, so that you can hold on to those dates. We may, in fact, also need a May meeting. There's just a lot in preparation for the coming school year, so we want to make sure we bring them together. We will aim to stay closer to an hour in the sessions ahead, so more often allows us to do that, but we had some time-sensitive items that needed to get discussed this evening. So I appreciate you all hanging in there and staying with us for this very full and rich discussion today. Any final questions or comments before we wrap up? It is 5:06, and with your okay, members of our school board, I'd like to adjourn our conversation. Is that okay?
Thanks so much. Yeah,
Thank
appreciate
you.
it, Damien.
You all appreciate it. Thanks everybody for being here. Student representatives, excellent work tonight. I really appreciate your engagement. Great job,
All
everybody.
right, take
Have a
care.
good night. You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.